Now, to continue looking further at this second summit between Kim Jong-un and President Trump, we have joining me now to my right, Dr. Myong-hyun, a research fellow at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies.
Thanks for having me.
And to my left, we have our Arirang correspondent, Kim Minji, in the studio as well.
Thank you for having me as well.
It's good to have you both here. Now, let's start with what is going on right now in Vietnam. It's currently about 2:20 p.m. here in Korea, but in Hanoi, it's about 12:20 p.m. And you would think that such high-stakes meeting between Kim Jong-un in the evening and tomorrow between President Trump and Kim Jong-un would mean President Trump will be taking it easy today. But in fact, he's been very busy. Minji, can you recap what he's been doing today?
Yes, like we've heard from our reporters on the ground, President Trump about an hour ago met with Vietnam's President Nguyen Phu Trong at the presidential palace. Now, he said there was great significance for peace on the peninsula for Vietnam to hold this summit. And that would have been followed by a meeting and an expanded working lunch with Prime Minister Win Shin-fook at the Office of Government Hall at noon, so probably taking place as we speak right now. Now, after those schedules, Trump is expected to return to his hotel, the JW Marriott, where before he heads out again for the one-on-one with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un tonight, as well as a dinner together.
So, Dr. Go, he's been meeting with the leader of Vietnam and even signing a trade deal. I mean, it seems like quite a busy schedule considering what's going to happen later tonight. What do you make of his activities today?
Well, I think President Trump is to portray himself as not a typical politician. He's actually taking his time, not just to focus on this important issue of the nuclearization of North Korea, but also in creating jobs for the American workers, because the trade deal he signed today in Vietnam involves the export of U.S.-made planes, passenger aircrafts, by the scale of 100 Boeing planes at least. So I think President Trump is going to go back after the summit and then tell the American electorate that he's been working ceaselessly to create jobs for the American workers.
What does this say about his preparations for meeting with Kim Jong-un, though? Because obviously, you know, there's a lot riding on this, but the fact that he's been busy doing other things today. What do you make of that?
Well, I think, in a way, that's the implication for the work under agreement that could have been reached at the working level before going to the summit. And I think, in a way, the positivist interpretation of his schedule today will signal that the big framework of the agreement has already been settled, meaning that North Korea and the United States have agreed on what will be the give and take in terms of denuclearization on the part of North Korea and concessions on the part of the United States. And because we know going into the summit that the outcome of the summit might not be the breakthrough that people expected, but a so-called small deal in which North Korea and the United States are going to implement what they discussed back in Singapore 8 months ago. I think maybe President Trump is okay with the idea of having a small deal at this time at least, maybe push down the bigger talks about serious denuclearization measures down the road for the next opportunity.
We'll talk further about the kind of agreements that they could be reaching a bit later. But first as well, let's contrast Kim Jong-un's schedule today, because there doesn't seem to be much movement. What do we know about his activities?
So nothing has been confirmed for Kim's schedule as of yet. So just after an hour-long briefing, a visit to the North Korean embassy on Tuesday after arriving, he spent the most of his time inside within the hotel compounds. Now, he is expected to be briefed by officials on the working-level negotiations that have taken place prior to this summit and possibly prepare for his one-on-one tonight with President Trump. But given that there's still hours left before the one-on-one and the dinner, Kim could also go to some key industrial sites in Vietnam like he did in Singapore before or after the summit. Now, some of the places that experts speculate are the Bac Ninh province, where there is a Samsung Electronics factory that makes smartphones, or also a visit to the port and industrial city of Haiphong. Now, a team of North Korean officials left the hotel this morning amid speculation that they would travel to Haiphong, and the delegation there includes Lee Soo-yong, who is in charge of international affairs at the Workers' Party of Korea.
Contrasting with Trump's schedule, Kim Jong-un seems to be inside preparing for the summit. I mean, if you say what you said earlier about the fact that perhaps the details of the agreement have already been reached and President Trump is taking it easy doing other events, what does it say about the fact that Kim has decided to stay inside and not do any these other activities?
Well, I think we have to take into account the fact that Kim Jong-un actually traveled by train all the way to Vietnam for 3 whole days. And I think he needs to recover from his trouble. That's probably one of the first priorities for him and his entourage. And another thing is that probably also, as you mentioned, he's focusing on the contents of the potential agreement with President Trump. Even though we were talking about the small, quote-unquote, small deal being made this time, and also maybe the big details have been ironed out, but maybe Kim Jong-un is considering the last-minute changes. We know for a fact that North Korea might put on the table 3 different names of 3 different nuclear facilities that we mentioned before back in Singapore, such as Punggye-ri nuclear test site, the Dongchang-ri missile test site, and the Yongbyon nuclear material site. And I mean, maybe Kim Jong-un might add or subtract any of these facilities in the final agreement.
I mean, we're not sure what Kim's schedule is like today, but we do know the fact that he'll be staying a couple of extra days because the North Korean state media revealed that he'll be staying in Hanoi for March 1st and March 2nd. Minji, can you tell us a little bit more about what the North Korean media has reported?
Yes, so the news came as North Korea's media reported on Wednesday about the leader's arrival in Vietnam and that he had received a special report from the working-level negotiators ahead of the summit with President Donald Trump. Now, the KCNA reported that Kim is to pay an official goodwill visit to Vietnam on Friday and Saturday after his 2-day summit that starts on Wednesday or today. And so there's speculation that his visits to industrial and factory sites could take place back then on Friday and Saturday, and he is also speculated to visit Ho Chi Minh Mausoleum and pay respects there because his grandfather Kim Il-sung had held summits previously in 1958 and 64.
So there was some historical context for Kim Jong-un's visit to Hanoi. His grandfather, the first leader of the North Korean current regime. So there's much significance there. How important is Kim Jong-un's visit to Vietnam?
Well, Vietnam is a country still ruled by a communist party, just like North Korea. And we know the communist countries in the world have dual kind of relationships with other communist regimes. One is the state-to-state relations, normal diplomatic relations, but there's also more important special relations, party-to-party relations. So in that sense, I think Vietnam being a fellow communist country just like North Korea, it's important for North Korea to use this opportunity to reaffirm its special relations with Vietnam because, as Minji mentioned before, the relationship between Vietnam and North Korea go way back to 1958 when Kim Il-sung, founder of North Korea, visited the country. And also North Korea sent its troops to Vietnam to support the North Vietnamese troops back then in the fight against the American forces during the Vietnam War, where dozens of North Korean, mostly pilots, lost their lives. So you can say that Vietnam and North Korea have a relationship that's forged in blood, a very important relationship in that sense. But at the same time, Vietnam, because it was engaged in economic reform and opening since the 1980s, has diverged from North Korea in its path towards development. And I think that's the reason why Vietnam neglected, so to speak, its relationship with North Korea. So I think Kim Jong-un is trying to make amends or trying to reestablish stronger bonds with Vietnam using this opportunity.
So we don't know his full schedule in Vietnam, but we do have some details about what's going to happen tonight. Now, of course, that's what everyone's waiting for, the first meeting between Kim Jong-un and President Trump in Hanoi. There's been some details that have been released, it seems, by the US side. What do we know?
Well, the two leaders are scheduled to kick off their 2-day event tonight with a brief one-on-one between the two leaders and a social dinner as well. Now, that's expected to take place around 6:30 p.m., so 8:30 Korea time. And following a 20-minute one-on-one, it will be followed by a 90-minute dinner between the two sides, and it will include two officials from each side on top of the leaders. Now, this will take place at the Sofitel Legend Metropole, which will also be the official summit venue for tomorrow. And the Mood Atlas dinner session is likely to serve as a litmus test for this week's summit because it reunites the leaders for the first time in 8 months.
So it seems tonight, perhaps, there's the ceremonial, goodwill dinner, the social dinner, that's what it's called. That's going to happen, and perhaps, we can know what to expect there, some cordial remarks. But it's the one-on-one, the brief one-on-one meeting that the two leaders are going to have before. That's going to be what people are going to focus on. I mean, what do you think about the fact that they're having this meeting tonight?
Well, it's going to set the tone for tomorrow's main event, the summit. But also we have to understand that the President Trump is very different from his predecessors because he wants to put his strong personal stamp these diplomatic maneuvers, and he definitely believes that he can achieve his country's national objectives by having very personal interaction with the foreign leaders. And I think Kim Jong-un is actually epitomizes Trump's personal diplomatic approach. And I think it's probably Trump's idea just as much as Kim Jong-un's idea to have this one-on-one briefing and trying to iron out any major differences that the two sides might have that wasn't resolved at the working level. So in that sense, I mean, if there's still a disagreement over the big details, I mean, this will be the last chance for the two of them to figure this out.
At least they have, if they meet tonight, they have, throughout the night for their officials lower down to figure out any final details for their agreement tomorrow. Do you think that's why they are meeting today over a 2-day period rather than the 1-day period they met in Singapore?
No, I think it's been pre-scheduled before any kind of agreement was achieved. So this is a formal part of the meeting, and I think the reason why the two having 2-day meeting instead of just one, like the one that we witnessed in Singapore, is because I think Trump is trying to send a message to not just to North Korea but the rest of the world that the relationship between the two countries has been normalized, albeit in name. I mean, we have to understand. I think one of the media reports, many media reports actually, indicating that one of the issues that might be discussed this time and might be agreed upon will be the establishment of a liaison's office. And establishing a liaison's office with the United States is the first step towards the full normalization relations. And this 2-day meeting actually has all the stamps of and characteristics of a normal summit between the two leaders of a country that has normal relations. So I think it's an action on the part of both countries to portray their ongoing relationship as a normal relations rather than external relations that we have seen before.
But we understand that they're going to meet tonight and they're going to meet tomorrow, but the actual summit talks, the expanded meeting, is only going to be over one session, we understand. Do you think everything that means is in place already over the last few days with their officials?
Well, has to be. I mean, the summits are never about ironing out small details. It's all about celebrating whatever agreement that's been signed or agreed upon at the staff level. So chances that Steve Biegun and his North Korean counterpart, Kim Minji, I believe, I think they probably have agreed upon the major details. But there might be some little discrepancies or maybe some surprises in store, especially on the North Korean side. And Kim Jong-un might put on the table a surprising offer to President Trump to analyze and take. So that's the only possibility. But overall, the format of the summit indicates to me that all the major details have been ironed out. But then still, so there might be some surprises in the store.
They met last time 8 months ago in Singapore, but actually for this summit, preparations haven't been actually that long. They only announced it a few weeks ago, really. What has happened since then? I mean, what kind of negotiations have they had so far?
Well, we've seen tough marathon negotiations happening in Hanoi prior to this scheduled summit. So it follows 5 days of consecutive talks between U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun, and his North Korean counterpart, Kim Minji, whose official title is the Special Representative for U.S. Affairs at the State Affairs Commission. Now, Biegun and Kim had arrived in Hanoi last week, and their daily meetings began on February 21st. So that's about a week ago. Now, that's where the real negotiations actually began to reduce the gaps. The two had met previously in Pyongyang, where about a dozen items were on the table for discussion. But this is when they were actually seeing what cards each side had and what they wanted. And back here in Hanoi, it was more about narrowing their differences and drawing up a joint statement which the two leaders could possibly sign following their summit talks tomorrow. But given that the meetings in Hanoi got shorter and shorter as the days went past, it also sparked speculation that the two sides significantly narrowed their differences on a summit agreement, which will likely include North Korea's steps towards denuclearization and U.S. corresponding measures.
Dr. Go, would you agree with that assessment? Does it seem like there are signs that show the two sides have been narrowing their differences over the last few days?
Well, they have to. I mean, the two leaders have been scheduled to meet, and then they cannot really, air these differences to the public and to the international community at the top level. So definitely there must have been some sort of agreement that's satisfying more or less to both sides.
But the fact is, there haven't been many days. Are you surprised by how perhaps easy it seems over the last few days that they've been able to have these sessions which get shorter and shorter?
Well, that's again as an indication that the potential agreement that will come out of this summit is not going to be a major breakthrough. It involves a lot of details, a lot of concessions, and corresponding measures and actions. We're talking about a small deal again.
You've mentioned there a small deal, but Minji, can you explain to us what people mean by a small deal and a big deal?
Well, at the moment, it seems that President Trump has seemingly lowered expectations, saying that he's in no rush, that the Hanoi summit won't be the first. So it's raised speculation of a small deal. Now, that would cover the dismantlement of ICBMs and possibly the Yongbyon nuclear test site, as North Korea has already suggested in its summit with President Moon back in September last year. And in return, North Korea could possibly get economic assistance and possibly some ways to improve the ties between North Korea and the U.S. Now, a big deal, on the other hand, would be the full, final, and verified denuclearization, which would see the scrapping of all nuclear-related facilities and the verification of that. And then this would obviously result in the lifting of sanctions, possibly, and the signing of a peace treaty and improving relations between the two. But we're not expected to get as far as there. So what many experts have said is they should try to reach a middle deal, which would involve the closing down of the Yongbyon nuclear test site, as well as coming up with a timeline that would work towards North Korea's denuclearization down the road.
Dr. Go, does North Korea really have to take steps towards these kind of nuclear facilities now? I mean, there are some other things that they could have negotiated, but there has to be real steps towards nuclear disarmament now.
Well, the reason we're talking about these nuclear facilities right now is because it's been mentioned several times before, which now, especially Myong-hyun, has been the focus of previous denuclearization negotiation between North Korea and the United States, dating back to the 1990s with the agreed framework. So that's why Myong-hyun is back on the table. And at the same time, because Myong-hyun, in a way, taking the typical timeline that North Korea used to develop its nuclear capability, has no longer, it's not really present a major usefulness to the regime anymore, because Myong-hyun is all about plutonium, and North Korea has moved on to enriched uranium. So it established a lower bar for North Korea in terms of negotiation. North Korea can use Myong-hyun as a bargaining chip at the initial stage of denuclearization, because it represents a smaller cost for North Korea if negotiation at the end of the day turns out to be not working, then North Korea would have given a small concession to the United States. So that's the reason why the document is being talked about right now. And additionally, I think the scale of the small deal has been changing over time. The small deal was actually a medium-sized deal in the last month, but now it's getting smaller and smaller. And the small deal right now, we're talking about the 3 test sites, that's actually 3 nuclear sites that we mentioned before, plus maybe an undisclosed nuclear site that the North Korea might, definitely we know has, but hasn't really disclosed. And that will involve an enriched uranium site, such as Gangsong, that's been mentioned in the U.S. intelligence reports, but North Korea never officially acknowledged. So this is the scope of the small deal that we're talking about right now. So in that sense, I think there's some actually lower expectation in the sense, but at the same time, it's more doable.
What do you think is the U.S. ready to give at this point as well? Because there's been a lot of talk about the North Korea wanting sanctions to be lifted, but then Trump saying that he's completely ruling that out.
Yeah, so sanctions, the bulk of the sanctions regime, which involves the financial sanctions, the trade sanctions, and also major ban on investments on North Korea, are going to be in place. But then I think Trump is willing to entertain the idea of helping the two Koreas to expand its inter-Korean exchange projects, such as economic exchange projects, such as Myong-hyun. I mean, Kaesong Industrial Complex, it's more important to North Korea, but it's probably out of question for now. But the Myong-hyun, because it presents a simpler people-to-people exchanges, it might be considered as a way for the United States to incentivize North Korea to go down with the denuclearization measures they had promised.
That's where we'll wrap things up for now, but you'll both be coming back in our next newscast, so to continue our discussions, hope you can, we look forward to having more of your insights then.
Thank you.